6:04. I'm going to call the public forum to order.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, this is just intended to be a conversation. So we invited members of the community or anybody who had questions about really our budget process and budget calendar. There's not a whole lot at this point that we're reporting out on our budget. We're still in the development phase. Again, I think we talked a little bit at our last meeting. The first meeting that we had with the town around our budget last year was in March. And we've already started having conversations with the town administrator was in a couple weeks ago. We've committed to saying we'll get our first iteration of the budget to him by December 30th, which is when other town departments are due, with the understanding that that's really not going anywhere beyond him. It's just allowing him to get a general idea of how the schools fit into the puzzle that is the town budget. And we recognize, and he recognizes, that there's going to be considerable change from that first iteration of the budget to what ultimately we hope the school committee votes on in early April and the town votes on Monday, May 8th, is what we have identified as the annual town meeting at this point. So I don't know if anybody who's here has any specific questions, or if the committee has any questions or specifics that they would like us to dive into. We're really open to any of that right now, or if there's feedback on how things played out last year in terms of how we communicated our budget to different stakeholders. We're certainly open to that feedback. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Come on up, Jen. There's a mic right up here.
You might have to come to the mic for them to hear you. She's going to change. She's not going to have a question anymore.
Yeah. Hi, Jennifer Millette, 138 East Street. My one question, I have a few, is your budget process for FY24, has it already started, and are you getting good feedback from everybody involved? And the expectation of the cherry sheet, when is that going to be out? Because I know that has something to do with how we look at our budget.
Sure, thank you. So I can start with where we are in the process. So yes, we have started the process. Really, it starts with a look internally as to what our needs are at this time. I think one thing that we tried to hammer home last year was our budget is really built on projections and information that we have at any point in time, and that information changes consistently. It's the one thing that is consistent, is that information changes. So sometimes we need to pivot based on certain changes. I think one place we've talked about in a previous meeting, we had 13 new English language learners enroll in our schools last year. So when we built the budget in March and April last spring, we didn't have a sufficient amount of services to provide those students that we ended up having come in August and September, which meant we had to pivot and make some changes and look at ways that we could do things differently. So right now, in terms of the process, we're collecting that information based on our staffing, student needs, IEPs, things like that, to say, all right, this is what we're going to absolutely need. And then also going to our teachers and saying, what are some materials, what are some resources that might benefit you in your classes? So this first version of the budget is typically, we've kind of said it's like, put all your wants, put your wish list in it, because we need to have some of those conversations knowing that the department heads and principals are going to have to make some decisions and say, well, we can't move forward with this year. But there was a second part to your question that I don't think I'm...
Cherry sheet.
Oh, the cherry sheet.
Yes, that's not out yet.
No, I know it's not out.
Yep.
But have they given a projection of when?
When you say, like, is the state? No. And with the new governor this year, that their budget is usually due with fourth Wednesday in January. With the new governor, that would probably be delayed by a week to 10 days. So we're probably into the first week of February before we know what our Chapter 70, the first iteration of our Chapter 70 will be. Yeah, yep. So when there's a new governor, they build in some additional time for them to file the budget. Yeah.
Are there any grants?
I mean, we've applied for, last year we got the early literacy grant. I believe there was another math grant that we applied for.
Not last year.
There are some one-off grants that we are applying for. As far as COVID, ESSER, we're in year 3, or we'll be in year 3 of that next year, which we'll use some of that money to help offset the operating budget. We're doing a good job. I think Sue's here. Sue's doing a great job of finding grants, and we're applying for them to help, help our budget, to help offset some of that liability on our budget. So we're doing the best we can. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then there are some other federal grants that, right, they're formulaic. So the Title 1, 2, 4, 3, 4A, those come based on, the enrollment numbers, service needs, and things like that. So again, those are things that we're typically building our first version of the budget on projections. So building in a little bit of an increase from what we received in the previous year to account for some of that, and then we adjust as those projections become actuals.
One of the biggest impacts on our budget this year will be increasing costs in tuition and out-of-district rates for private schools. So OSD, if you're familiar with that, is the one who sets the rates for in-state and out-of-state special ed placements. And for the last 10 to 12 years, we've seen an inflationary increase of about 2% year over year. And for FY24, it's going to be 14%. So for the current placements that we have in our budget, before we do anything, it's about $105,000 impact to our budget. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot. There is some things going on behind the scenes at the legislative level to hopefully kind of quell some of that impact for districts. But right now, that's the increase that we're looking at, and it's going to have a substantial impact on our budget. So it's good that we know it early on. We can do some planning, we can do some reallocating, but it's a big number, especially in a small town like us. That's about 1% of our operating budget. It's a pretty big number for us to navigate. So we're doing our best. Again, we got it early enough, but we're hoping for some relief, but we'll see over the next few months.
Is that like, what's the projection of years for that?
It's annual, so
Right.
yeah, so OSD has to put it out, has to share it, I think it's by November 1st with superintendents in the Commonwealth. And each year, typically there's an increase, but that increase over the last 10 or 11 years has been an average in the 1.8 area, and this year's is 14. So it had never been, in the last 10 or 11 years, it had never been over, I think, 2.6 or 2.7. So 14 is a pretty astonishing number.
There's two things that go into that. One is obviously the rising costs for everything, and then what they call the workforce stability factor, which is turnover and trying to find people to fill positions. So those are the two main factors that go into that 8%. And again, unfortunately, districts don't have much of a say in the increase in those rates.
And our out-of-district numbers are pretty reasonable. We have 6 or 7 students out of district-wide. Again, like anything that we're talking about, those numbers change over the course of the year. In the past 6 months, we've brought a student back from out of district, but we've also had to send a new student out. So a lot goes into that process. It's it's sometimes it becomes a really long process to make sure that that student can't be successful, or we can't meet that student's needs in our least restrictive environment. Any other questions, comments? We fully recognize that not everybody's thinking budget in mid-December. So one of the things that we put on the budget calendar is that we'll have, I think, 2 more public forums, at least one, but I think 2 more public forums. So after the holidays, after the new year, as people, and the governor's budget gets released in late January, early February, and we get a little bit closer to what that final number is, whatever it might be. We want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to the community, but also to our staff. We met with staff at both schools to have conversations. Principals, department heads are meeting with members of their teams and departments to inform the decisions that they're going to bring forward as well. So we do anticipate having other opportunities to have these types of questions when people can see what the numbers actually look like.
Yeah, our next forum's scheduled for Tuesday, February 14th. We may adjust that date depending on when we get the budget, but we do have another one scheduled in February.
By that February date, would we have more numbers that we were looking at though? Because I feel like it's hard for people to kind of comment back on comments or questions when we're not really presenting much per se.
Yeah, so we should have the governor's preliminary budget by the 14th. We'll definitely have it by the 14th. Whether we can turn around that information and have some valuable numbers by the 14th will be the question, but I'm sure we could certainly pull it off. They're going to be very high level numbers, but
Right, and especially because they have extra time this year, maybe that would be another reason why we should possibly move that forum back.
Yep.
And again, the first time we shared the budget with anyone outside of ourselves last year was March. So we are trying to make sure we recognize that we're a little bit ahead of schedule here, but we want to make sure that we're providing these opportunities to have conversations so that when we're making a presentation about our budget before the forum or before the public hearing, that's probably one of the first times that you'll see like actual numbers, where we started, what cuts we've made, what decisions have been made, and that's what we went through last year. And that was our intent in this meeting, and likely some in that February meeting, is to let people have an opportunity to say, when you did this last year, this worked for us, or this didn't work for us. Could you have done this? There was a question that last year, it was on one of the charts we had about percentage, and it was really just a percentage of that line in our budget, but I think it looked like it was a percentage increase over a previous year's budget. So like that's something we walk away with and say, how can we be more clear when we're presenting that? Because we want to make sure that when people are discussing the budget, right, when it's a topic of conversation at a game or practice or a dinner or whatever it might be, that like the information is accurate. And there's a lot of information and a lot plays into the budget development for us, but we want to try to be a resource to people so you're not having to go look for places to say, hey, we have a question about this. And if you're having to go look, like hit pause, send us an email, and if we can answer that question quickly for you, it's much better than you having to dig through different websites and information. If that's certainly your choice, but if we can be helpful, we want to make sure that we are.
I think for me, in the beginning, it's more of a collaboration of the community with everyone involved, just to make sure that we're planning and thinking ahead before we actually get the numbers. 'Cause I think it's a waste of time if we wait until when the numbers come out, because then you're scrambling trying to get this information. And is everyone who is participating, do they feel comfortable with giving the information?
Yeah.
Or are they saying what they actually need?
Yeah. Yeah, and I anticipate we made good progress, and I think we're in a good place with select board and the finance committee from last year. And what we ended up doing to kind of keep things moving is each of those committees had a representative come to some meetings, so we could talk through some things, and it felt much more productive than it had in previous years. And I anticipate something similar happening as we move this process forward this year. Other questions or comments? No? All right, so I guess in closing, Adam and I said last year, and I will stick to it this year, that we're happy to take our show on the road. We went to PTO, or not PTO, went to GMPA last year, the Booster Club, and we recognize that it's difficult maybe to schedule a meeting and come to us. So if there's organizations that are already having meetings and they have budget questions or how it might impact them, we're happy to come to you. If you don't invite us, I'll probably reach out to you at some point and see if you would invite us to a future meeting. Again, all in an effort to make sure that people are informed. We recognize that ultimately it doesn't come down to my feeling or any individual's feeling. This is going to come down to a town vote, and we hope that people can make the most informed decision possible. And that's why we want to take these steps, so people recognize what's going into the budget, how we're thinking about it, and the impacts that we believe getting something or not getting something might have as we move closer. And we recognize that we are one piece in a bigger puzzle, and have to work within the town's greater budget as well, too.
I think we've got someone walking in, so we'll give a minute in case
Yeah,
that person has questions.
And then that February date was like a placeholder, so that's still fluid. We can still move that
Yeah,
around.
this calendar is it's a working document, so we can, again, once we have that preliminary budget, we can take a look and move dates if we need to. Questions from you down there? I feel like you do.
I already commented.
Okay.
You don't have to have just one, though.
I can just see it on her face. She's
I'll
got
save it
something,
for
so.
later.
Yeah.
Maybe your thought will make someone else have a question.
I'm good right now. Thank you.
Did I miss any questions?
No.
Not really.
Jen just asked about the cherry sheet and communication.
Okay. All right then.
I guess in terms of not information, but I mentioned it as I've kind of talked through things here. We want to be available, so if people have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I hope people don't wait for a public forum or public hearing to ask questions. Feel free to reach out, because if we can answer your question and that gives you the information you need, we're happy to do that. So, again, I think our emails are pretty easy to find, but mine is just ssullivan with the @GranbySchoolsMA.net. So email is probably the easiest way to get me, but you can certainly call the office, set up a meeting. Happy to do whatever works for any individual or group to try to get you information that you're looking for.
All right.
So,
If there are no other questions, then we'll conclude the public hearing and we'll go. Huh?
Public forum.
Public forum, what did I say?
Hearing.
Hearing, ooh, sorry, public forum. And we'll, start our, regular scheduled school committee meeting, which you're all welcome to attend. Please attend. There's refreshments, please help
Yeah,
yourself.
please.
Should have told the NHS girls.
They were here when I mentioned it earlier.
Oh, okay.
Too. I was like, oh, look, there's snacks. Anyone?
How should we go about better communicating this to people to attend in February? I'd welcome thoughts.
Try and look at the sports schedule. Right now, you have a JV and varsity basketball game and wrestling practice. So if you go to the student parking lot, nowhere to park. That's where everyone is right now.
Yeah.
I
When
think-
we originally planned this, the schedules weren't out.
Oh, okay.
I did talk with someone else about it too. I think it's really hard because tonight there's JV boys, but say we do it last night or tomorrow night, then there's girls.
Right.
And then there's swim, and then there's I think we're trying to be mindful of the schedule, but I think it's super tough to get a night where there's nothing.
When-
Correct yourself and just break in between the schedules, that might be better. So like if you guys are gonna push off like past February, find that break between winter and spring. There's usually a week or two, that might be the better bet if you wanna like try and get the parents here.
That
I don't
might,
know if that's too late.
that might actually be too late. But certainly, I'm wondering if we maybe change location and do the cafeteria at the high school, or if it would just be too distracting.
That's
What-
actually where they're wrestling right now, because they have 40, K through 6, kids wrestling right now.
Or the high school
Well, I know there
library.
was supposed to be basketball for the elementary kids here tonight, and they did cancel it in anticipation that they would need the gym. Obviously, those parents didn't come either. But at the same time, I feel like the biggest thing would be like, I don't think people know what to ask. You know what I mean? Like, again, today there was no real presentation, so what am I asking about? I feel like, you know, more if when we're sharing it, and Granby PTO even shared it on their page too, and shared it in a couple of the different pages on Facebook, but, you know, like, almost giving people the language of like, if you have questions of, I'm not sure, I feel like that there's not a understanding of like, what should I be asking about too? You know?
People coming in.
So maybe even like some sort of, do we have like a little flyer of like, did you know, and like prompt some questions, and then if someone looks at that and goes, oh, I don't know about that, maybe it's just like a guided question, as silly as.
Right, like I think there's some sort of jumping off point, because as, you know, they've elected us, so they are mostly assuming that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, the majority of people, I'm sure. But then, yeah, you're not quite sure what should you be asking about, what, you know, it'd become one of those, once we hear what the first iteration of the budget is, and if we're looking at losing funding for certain things to cover certain costs, that's usually when you kind of get more interest too, if it's something that they're passionate about. But, you know, how do you drive that passion without that? I mean, the biggest message I think we really need to get out there is how much we need families of students in our schools to come to town meeting. You know, and, you know, if they have questions or things that we can answer beforehand, to have them in town too, you know, that we can answer so it's not on town floor. That's why we do this. You know, we don't want questions coming out on town floor. We want to have these opportunities to have these discussions now. But I don't know that people know what questions to ask until they hear other people's opinions. Again, like you said, Jen, you know, one person's comment might drive a thought for another person. But I'm not sure if, you know, where do we start from?
I think we should definitely have Stephen and Al come to our ask, to our meeting, because there's more parents there. And if here also, because it's a different group
Right.
than what comes to school.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece that I've been trying to say for the last 2 years is, I don't know that there's anything specifically that we're gonna do to pack this room on December 13th or April 13th for that matter, but if you're getting 15 people at a PTO meeting, that's a ready-made group for us to go and have a conversation with.
Right,
If
and
GMP,
that is actually steadily growing.
yeah,
And we do have the online that we've been having, so we do have people, last night we had 4 online.
yeah.
On top of, I think it was 7 or 8 that were actually in person.
Yeah, so I think the PTO is certainly in a different place this year than it was last year. So I think you're right too, Audrey, that probably doesn't make sense for us to come to a PTO meeting now, but as we get a clearer picture of the budget in late February, March, then you start to have some more meaningful conversations because people might have some more of those specific questions.
So with that being said, we actually have our meeting on the 13th, the day before the 14th of your board again. If that would be a possibility, I would say we could potentially talk about it and advertise it for that. To spark more questions to bring that group here for the forum for more questions as they think about it overnight. You know what I mean?
Yep, yeah, I think there's value in us going to people where they are. I understand people are busy, so it's tough to say, I'm gonna come out on this Tuesday night or Monday, whatever the night is. I think we've said that about town meeting as well. I think the demographic of people that we're having conversations with, parents typically, or, right? And I get that the vote is the full town, so we want to make sure we're informing them. But the 700 students that are in the district and their families, I think sometimes it's, when you have softball practice and you have band and you have instrumental practice and you have this, it's difficult to say 7 o'clock on May 8th, like, okay, now I'm going to go out to town meeting as well. But I think you're right, like, that's really where the decision gets made, right? Because it is the town making that decision. So, and whether they're supporting the school budget or supporting another line item, whatever it is, I think that's the place where people can have their voice heard. And we want to make sure that they're walking in there with as much information as possible from us so that they can make an informed decision on the school budget.
We didn't get the second warrant. I only got one of them.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Where's the second one that's not on the front? Yep.
No, that's the one she did sign. That one.
So question, out of curiosity, with the budget, is that actually putting into like outdoor items for students at the schools with the budget, or is it just for like the classrooms and the teachers? I'm asking.
Do you have like a
because the school asked us as a PTO to see if we could raise funds to help with playground materials.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if that is part of the budget.
So it could be, that would be something that is probably in the version of the budget that we have in December. Does all of that make it to the final budget? It's tough for us to say right now without having all the context. But yeah, that is something that could fall in our budget, but I think there's things like that that have been supplemented by either other organizations or grant funding and things like that in the past. So something like that isn't taking away from something else that we might need in the operational budget. And that's the challenge, right? You have competing priorities all along the way and say, yeah, our kids need more equipment outside to play with. Yes, absolutely. But then they also need projectors at whatever it might be. So you're making those decisions. But yes, it could be included in the budget.
Figure out.
Yeah, yep. I'm actually looking at maybe your March 13th meeting might be, we might just be a little further down the road, but not too far down the road at that point, because we have our, when's the hearing scheduled? The public hearing?
Hearing is scheduled.
The 4th, right? Yeah. So we have our public hearing scheduled for March 4th.
No.
I'm sorry, April 4th.
Yeah, that week, yep.
Oh, that's not on the calendar.
On the budget calendar, it's the week of April 3rd through 7th. It says public hearing to present FY24 budget.
Yes, public
The
hearing.
week of, I don't,
Sorry, yeah, week of.
I don't think we settle on a date, but it's that week.
Yeah, I just put a hold on our calendars for that day. So March 13th might be a little further down the road, and then there's still a public forum and a hearing in between that could, so I'm gonna just make a note in my calendar.
Bless you. Okay, if there's nothing else, should we start the school committee meeting? Did you call us to order already?
Just for the public forum.
Do we need to adjourn and then restart?
I don't know that you need to adjourn, but I think you need to start the
Okay.
official meeting.
The time is 6:36 p.m. and we'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order. First up is our consent agenda. First item is the minutes from November 29th, 2022. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? Any questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for November 29th.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next is warrants 33 and 35. Any comments, questions?
My only
Hearing-
comment is I was looking through them because they weren't in, listen.
Yeah, they don't look like they're in our
They weren't.
folder. I was just going on, did I look in the wrong spot? Yeah, they weren't in our folder. Does anyone want to look at them again? If not, I'll take the motion.
I'll make the motion to approve warrants number 33 and number 35.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is visitors' comment. Any citizen wishing to speak before the committee must sign in with the administrative assistant prior to the opening of the regular session of the school committee. The visitor will identify themselves by name and address and shall speak for no longer than 3 minutes. For anyone who is unable to sign in ahead of time, we ask that you clearly state your name and address so that this information can be included in the record for the meeting. Do we have any visitors for public comment? Okay. Next, student representative, Marcus. There's a chair right here in the middle.
Just for
Just be
you.
careful, watch all the
Yeah,
wires.
watch those wires, please.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I'm the one that likes to trip on those, just for effect.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I don't know how I feel about this setup, personally. All right. So, we have added a new segment to my report featuring the East Meadow perspective of the student life. So I'll start with the high school. We sent out the course requests for teachers so the teams will meet and they'll discuss which courses will run for next year and any new classes could be proposed. A new requirement is that a minimum of 10 students would be required to run a class. Right now we only have like 3 or 4 classes that have less than that, but it is something that is significant because you would have to sell the classes more and get more participation in some classes, especially those of higher difficulty. The junior high will not be picking their classes this year as they had in the past. Instead, they will rotate 4 times throughout the year instead of the usual 2 that we've been doing. We have our December extravaganza under full swing. Last weekend was no homework weekend, and we had bingo, a study block, and karaoke. We have Spirit Week next week and pep rally. There was a can drive through Project 351 in Hope, and it's a competition to see which class can raise the most, and Mr. Cree's class won. We have Cotillion coming up on January 20th at the Boathouse in South Hadley. We have a parking raffle for the principal and vice principal spots, which is part of the December extravaganza happening this week. Winter sports have kicked off. We have great participation this season. We have 2 girls in the new female hockey co-op, 2 Granby residents running in the winter track club, and we have the youth wrestling program, which has 40 participants and features the older players from the high school assisting to teach them. Miss Stapert has an art fundraiser. She had a fall fundraiser featuring like Halloween art, and now she's doing a winter themed one. We had a lot of other fundraisers and other activities through the grades. We had the Krispy Kreme for the seniors. There's a movie raffle basket from the freshmen, and the junior Stuco is doing a shoe drive of new and used shoes. The Booster Club, Mr. Dubuque, and the facilities team at the high school helped to refurbish a scorers table, which we would use for wrestling or for basketball games. They refurbished it, gave it new padding, new logos, and it came out very nice. It's a great way to repurpose something instead of buying something new and saving money. We have the weight room, which is currently a quite small space that's just a hallway. It's now expanding out. Mr. Greeny is working to grow the equipment and use of the area, and he would be running a club for any of the high school members to join and just go and work out. For senior activities, there's the senior trip planning and some talks of graduation already happening, even though it's a few more months away still, but it's coming up fast. You gotta start preparing now. The Dino contest has around 30 elementary admissions and 18 high school, and it ends on December 22nd, and it'll be painted in the spring. That's all for the high school, and so I was able to go and meet with Miss Desjardins just to see what kind of things she has to offer going on over here. I don't get to see what happens over here on a personal perspective like I do in the high school, so it's a little bit harder for me to pick some things out. But she has a new student council for grades 4 through 6. There are currently 18 students that have joined, and they already have a new glove, mitten, and hat drive for the Granby to Go program. And then she asked if some members of the high school student council would be willing to come and just talk and see what they're up to, tell them what we do, help them out. And so we will be doing that at one of their January meetings. The book fair was recent and it did very well. The PBIS rewards program has a winter event on December 23rd, which would be a craft, and it's all winter themed. And then a speech and language teacher, Cheryl Boisel, was recognized by the was given a grant by the communication board for kids on the autism spectrum, especially those who are nonverbal. That's all I got.
Any questions for Marcus?
Nope, just a comment. I love that you added in East Meadow. I think
Yeah.
it's great.
I think it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, and thank you, because I
Yeah.
know that's extra on you.
I think it's really cool to go and meet with the 4th through 6th graders who are just starting this, what is student council, to see what it is at the high school, because
Yeah.
obviously it's a whole other thing, but it's a great resource for them to see what you guys do.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right then, Marcus.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
Careful those cords. Next is the vote to extend private school applications. This is a carryover from a few meetings ago, and we were going to bring it back for this time. I don't know that we settled on a length of time.
I don't think we had either.
I think
So-
3 was suggested. I remember Mr. Griffin had suggested 3 years is what it was prior, but it was obviously open to 5 as well, and just that that was echoed as well with
Right, I think we had said as long as there was some sort of yearly communication about enrollment numbers, which,
which that is in our folder.
correct.
So, I was gonna say the same thing, Audrey, as long as we get some enrollment information from them yearly, I don't know, when would be the most beneficial, do you, like,
Say after October 1st.
after October 1st? I don't see, we can try it for, 3 years and see how it works for people. You know, how the committee, how the administration feels about it, and if we need to revisit and go back to yearly.
I was gonna say, should we start like by doing like a one-off year and doing 2-year, you know what I mean? I don't know, or jump right to 3? I'm fine with whatever,
Well, it seems like
But-
their enrollment has been fairly
consistent.
and steady,
So we
so
haven't had an issue hearing from them when we've needed them, so
Right.
personally I wouldn't be
I would say the
uncomfortable just-
relationships are fairly good, so,
Right.
you know, as long as we get, by predetermined date, their information, you know, and if they have anything they want to bring to us, they can certainly come to a meeting, right? We can have them come anytime.
Might it look a little different for each school in terms of enrollment information and reporting? Because I know when Donna was kind of connecting with us, I know, you know, they come kind of at that November timeframe, which was obviously after October 1st. But I know she was also then going to kind of connect once they had more numbers for kind of kindergarten and that enrollment piece too. So I know she's kind of connecting a couple of times in general, so I don't know if.
That we usually reach out to her for separately, has nothing to do with their application per se.
Right, so I don't know if then you just want to have that information only linked to the application for enrollment? Because I don't know, I understand the enrollment attached to McDuffie and kind of checking in on what that looks like, but then do we need that same information in the same way from Children First in terms of enrollment? I guess that's my question.
Well, I think we were thinking we would reach out to both of them for a check-in. I guess.
Right, but we had thrown out the date after October 1st, so that would be for McDuffie, but that wouldn't necessarily be the case for, I think that's where you're going with this, right?
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to be clear about the
The date.
purpose of the check-in. Because McDuffie, it was clear, because it was just about enrollment and making sure what those numbers look like and to maintain, kind of, understand what they look like for consistency purposes. And if it was different from Children First, just understand what that was, and if it was the same, fine, but just understand.
Thoughts?
Do we need to be that specific in our, like when we make the vote, the distinction, or do we need to just say that we're voting to move it into a 3-year cycle? Like,
I think the vote would be separate from your ask. The vote would be to approve the application for years beyond what you've already approved. The ask would be more of us reaching out and getting that information for discussion at a meeting, or to share with the committee, or to invite them in to talk about it. So I think you're right that we're probably getting the McDuffie information once annually, but we're probably getting the student first information, children first twice, at least. And in some ways for two different purposes. The second ask is so that we can make informed decisions about what classrooms, what we can anticipate for an enrollment in the subsequent year.
Right, which is sort of different than the application process. It's
Right.
like an additional ask. So, in my mind, the vote was to extend the application portion to 3 years instead of annually. And then we can still have those other asks and conversations with people like Donna or whomever we would need. And obviously, we could always revisit this too. If we say, hey, like, in a year and a half, or like this, you know, we need more of a check-in. There's nothing saying that, like, we can't revisit and modify. That was my understanding.
Yep.
And to be clear, they would still need to come in front of us for next year, because we already voted on a 1-year thing. So they would still need to appear in October and November of next year.
Or are we amending that right now?
No, it was for, well, we had said that it would be for future. Because we already voted several weeks ago on their application.
So then it's not a vote right now then?
It would be so that when we have them come next year, it would be for 3
Already
years.
set in place. Capiche. Got it.
Say that again?
So that when they come next year to redo it, then that time it would be a 3-year.
Right, so that we didn't forget about the conversation that we had.
Got it.
I hadn't thought about amending it to go backwards.
That's what I was thinking we were doing. Right?
That's what
No.
I was thinking
Okay.
too. I thought we were
And
extending
did I get that
what you
wrong?
already approved for additional years.
Right. So then they wouldn't come again until 2024.
Okay, I'm all wet on that, I'm sorry.
I don't think it makes a huge difference either way. I don't think we need to take a vote if we're gonna have them come back next October. I think we would just vote to approve that application for 3 years at that point, if that's what the committee chooses to do. I think if we're gonna make a vote tonight, you would approve it for an additional 2 years beyond what was already approved.
That makes so much more sense. Apologies. Major disconnect in my brain.
And I'm just taking notes about what we're gonna ask of them when, regardless of the year, what information.
So that, if that is, makes more sense, are we ready to make a motion?
I feel like nervous on how to word it here.
Retroactively extend the previous approval.
Go ahead, keep going.
All right, I'll make a motion to retroactively extend the private school applications from a 1-year to a 3-year term.
Excellent, can I have a second?
I'll second.
All you, Audrey.
I'll second.
Any further questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Approved unanimously. You'll let Donna and Stephen know?
Yes.
Excellent. Next is the emergency operation plan.
So we presented the emergency operation plan in our last meeting, and I think because it's such a dense document, the committee decided they wanted some time with it, and there was a question about, in the event of emergency, would the committee need to convene before we could take action? So we did consult with our council and added the following line. The Granby School Committee grants the superintendent of schools discretion to make emergency alterations to the district's emergency operations plan in emergency situations where time does not allow for school committee approval. In such instances, the school committee will be notified of any changes at their next scheduled meeting.
Sounds good to me.
And that was the only change, except for I think the emergency numbers got updated. I think they now say non-emergency, some of the feedback that you all had given, so.
Any additional discussion or questions on this?
My only question is, when is this going to be introduced to staff? Are they like I don't know how I wanna, retraining or aware of the updates and how different plans work?
So we probably, I mean, this is available to staff at any point because it'll be posted, but this document specifically, we don't work from with staff. We try to chunk it a little bit to break it down, and we talk a lot about ALICE, which is our choice-based response, and components of the plan, rather than giving the staff a 66-page document to, right? I think there's a lot of things in here that are relevant to staff, and there's probably an equal amount that they may never need. So we try to focus on the things that they may need and that they can be prepared for in their positions.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of my question. It's just uploading it as a resource. Most people
Yes.
aren't going to take their Saturday morning to read a 66-page
Fair enough.
emergency plan. I mean, maybe so, but I was just curious how that gets broken up and delivered, especially with ongoing
Yep.
changes and things, new staff members coming in, so everyone's aware of.
Yep, so it's available, and then, like, as situations come up, we're debriefing, we're sending out information to staff, then we are following up either at a faculty meeting and having those discussions. And two things that are kind of out there still, we talked about community ALICE training, EOPS training, which Zach and I are hoping to schedule for late January, early February, and what the training will look like for students at East Meadow. So that is part of a work in progress, but each situation is a little bit different, so we try to take from that what we can and then share out feedback with the whole staff as well.
Great.
If everybody's good, I'll take the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the emergency operation plan.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, too late.
Next is payment of first student invoices.
Yep, so the next two items, C and D, are FY22 invoices that I'd like your guys' approval for us to pay out of school choice. So the first invoices are from first students. So these are some athletic invoices from the prior year that somewhere in the previous AD not being here anymore, some staffing changes at first student. They were just brought to my attention in the fall that are outstanding again for last year athletics. So I would just like your guys' approval to use school choice to pay these outstanding invoices. I've done my due diligence. I've pushed this off as far as I can. I've gone back with first student to double, triple check to make sure that we haven't paid these, and we haven't. All these are legit outstanding invoices.
That's embarrassing.
What's that?
I said that's embarrassing.
Yeah, again, there was a few different reasons, and I'm not sure we can pinpoint one. Again, they had some turnover at first student. We had some turnover in our AD here. I'm not sure if these invoices were getting forwarded to that person and not being attended to. However, they were brought to my attention. Myself and Ariel did our due diligence to make sure they hadn't been paid, that we hadn't received them, that it was nothing on our end. So we do need to pay them.
And you're sure there were like
Yeah, so-
separate things and separate invoices and separate
Yeah, so I did forward these to Ally and our current AD, which doesn't they wouldn't necessarily know.
Cause I'm just
I
looking
was
like.
like the
Sep-
same date, right?
September
Yeah, so there's-
21st, there's four buses.
Yeah, so fall sports, I mean, we could have multiple sports going to different locations.
So it's not truly, it's just the date they invoiced, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the date of the, like, game.
Like service. It's
Yeah,
not,
no,
okay.
it's not the date of the game.
And
or,
is each one a one-way trip or is that a round trip?
No, it's round trip. It could include waiting time if they're waiting there, and a round trip. Yep.
Cause there's just a vastly different amount, some of them are
Right, so like,
$300 and some of them are like 100 and.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where,
right,
you
how
know,
far
we could
they
be going to
went.
Belchertown or we could be going to Mount Greylock. I mean, they're gonna be,
Right.
they're gonna be
In the
different.
future, do we track busing as well? Like, would we know, do we have anything where, you know, we sent X amount of buses here or there? I'm just curious, because it's interesting to look at, like, how many dates are the same, like, so 4 to 5.
So again, the invoice dates and the due dates don't go by the invoice date. On that invoice, there's a trip date, which might be,
Okay, so on the bill, there was a trip date.
there's a trip date with
Okay,
all the details.
sorry,
So,
that's my question,
if you
versus
would
just like
like
an
for
amateur
these-
date out there, just seemed like odd to me to look
Yeah.
at. Okay,
If you would like for these, I can provide you with all, I think there's about 30-something invoices that you guys can take a look at.
It's not that, I doubt, it's just, you know, here we are getting to look at invoices and
Yep,
it's like, how does this work? And I'm sure you asked all the same questions,
Yep.
but it's,
Right.
first of all, it's startling to me
Yep.
that this happened, because I know we have a transportation line,
Mhm.
and I thought athletics was a part of that. So when we said we had a well, not a discrepancy, but a difference in transportation,
Mhm.
we didn't actually, because this was, you know, so where's the check and balance for that? I
Well,
guess, is, you
this,
know.
I guess, right, like
Right?
how do we prevent this going forward? You know
Right.
what I mean?
So going forward, so as of right now, all transportation for student invoices come to me. If they're our regular transportation, like our daily buses, late buses, I'll approve them, sign them, put them in the warrant. If they're athletic related, I get them, they go right to the AD, they verify, sign them, and then send them back to me to be put on the warrant.
And that's what it is now
That's
after
how it
this?
is now. That's what the process is now. All the invoices come to me, and then
So
I'll disseminate
how would
them.
it have worked before? So you wouldn't have ever seen these, but how else would they have gotten paid?
So yeah, I mean, if I had seen these, they would have been paid.
Right, but, so I guess that's where the question is, right? Like, if you see all the invoices and sign off on them, and you're not seeing any from athletics, how do we not know that there
So
weren't?
I wasn't in the past. I wasn't seeing them from athletics. They would go to the
But we
AD.
would have had to somewhere, because the school doesn't write checks on its own, they all come out of your office, right?
Yeah, but so before, these invoices would have, I'm assuming, would have went straight to the AD. If the AD doesn't verify them, print them out, sign them, and then send them to me for the warrant, I would have no record of that.
Exactly my point. If you had no record of any kind of athletic bus,
Mm-hmm.
why wasn't there then a question?
Well,
For
there was
more
other
than a year.
invoices paid. These aren't all the athletic invoices. There was other athletic invoices that we did pay. These are just ones that, for some reason,
And First Student was also subcontracting. We were getting bills from the subcontractor
Okay.
that had to be sent back to First Student, and then First Student had turnover too. So I think,
yeah, these are, so I guess I see what you're saying, Jen. These aren't all the athletic invoices for last year. There were some that were paid that went through the process to the AD, signed off to my office to get paid. These, for some reason, did not follow that process. They weren't sent, they were never verified, printed out, sent to me. It could have been a couple of different reasons, but these aren't all the athletic invoices. We paid athletic invoices for last year.
I'm glad to hear we have a better process in place right now.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yep.
that's the positive, is that we've recognized where we've and worked towards fixing that. So I
Mhm.
think that's a positive. Yeah, there's nothing else to say.
Yeah, again, it's unfortunate. I wish I did have a better answer. I think there was just a few different things that were going on that these just.
And I remember us saying that we thought we had, had some savings too, and
Yep.
here it is.
Yep.
Would it be really obnoxious of us to ask, like, under that reference, it would be so nice if that's when they put the actual service date? Right, isn't
Well,
it?
it's not, the problem's gonna go away because he's gonna.
No, I know
everything's
that,
coming
I'm
to
just saying,
him.
but like, to read it, it's just, this is an odd way to receive a bill.
Well, this isn't a bill, it's a statement. It's just a summary of the invoices that are outstanding. I have the individual invoices that
Gotcha.
have
Okay. I
the,
said he
that's what I'm
would
saying.
send it.
I
Yes,
went
yes,
through all
no,
those.
no, I
and-
totally, I completely trust you, I just,
Yep.
like I said, it's odd when it's the same date repeatedly with no, like, item,
It's the invoice date.
It's just the way they.
Yeah.
I mean,
Correct.
we used to do, I used to do billing in a
So
past life, and I would do.
if there's a new process in place in
Mhm.
terms of who receives the invoices and where they're sent to, if they're going to two people or just to you and then you're sending them wherever they need to go, or the process here,
Yep.
is first student, is it Kathy still that you're getting invoices from, or
Yeah, there's
whoever?
that's
Yeah, I get it.
the other problem is that there's multiple
Yep.
contacts over there.
So, are they aware of exactly who they need to send it to?
Yep.
And if they don't, if they're not hearing kind of directly from you, so
Mhm.
like thinking about in the future, if they're not
Mhm.
hearing directly from you, like, is there a plan kind of going forward? Like,
Oh yeah, yep. I will
Okay.
certainly convey.
because I think for them, that could take a longer time
Mm-hmm.
to then adjust the process on their end.
Yep.
So thinking forward to that, like, what is that going to look like? Because I think on our end, it'll get kind of solved quickly.
Yep.
And like, if there's a transition, we'll be able
Mhm.
to adjust with that. But I'm thinking if they change the process on their end and they get it settled and then it changes again,
Mm-hmm.
it could take even longer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I will. It's a good question. Good point. So I will. Them along with other vendors, obviously, be reaching out to them at some point. That there will be a transition. I'll work with David. Hopefully, my email will stay active for several months. So, if they do want to continue to send them to me with a copy to whoever the new person will be, just to make sure there's an extra level of verification there, we can do that too.
Okay.
So again, I can provide you guys with all of these invoices if you would like to just go through them and double check them and do whatever you want to do, that's fine.
So why did you take the two top ones off, the 334.68?
Because those are from FY 21.
But we still need to pay them, no?
I let first student know that they wouldn't be getting payment for those since they're 2 years past due. At least those aren't a priority right now. I want to make sure we at least get last fiscal year invoices. Again, 2 years ago, I'm not really sure. I wish I could answer the question why we have invoices outstanding from 2 years ago. I don't know. And again, they've had turnover there. We had turnover here. There's not one person I could reach out to. But I told them that the priority would be FY22, and then we can discuss the
There's
other
no
two
like
invoices.
penalty for being past due, there's no, like,
No.
financially, okay.
No. And I'll be honest, we were, if you guys remember, negotiated a very favorable contract MOA with them during COVID and paid them for some services that they weren't providing during COVID. So I think we've been very fair with them. So they understand, at least for this, the priority is FY22. So let's get those straightened out, and then I can work with them on FY21.
I don't mean to keep after this, but just out of curiosity,
Mhm.
how much was our transportation savings from last year?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. I could get it for you. I don't know.
Because I know we have an amount that's on there, and I'm just curious, like how close are we? Maybe it doesn't matter. It's
What do you mean, how close we are to what?
like if we have a budget that a line item for transportation, and we know it varies a little bit, but
Yep.
this is we knew that we had savings in it. So I just, is it something that if it's such a large amount that's a trigger to us that, hey, something got lost in the wash,
Yeah,
Well, we asked for a reserve to cover
Yeah, so-
transportation last year.
So we didn't have.
When did we have savings for transportation?
That was 2 years
Oh,
ago
it was 2
because
years
of
ago? Okay.
COVID, 2,
I
3 years
apologize.
ago.
The
Yeah,
buses.
because of COVID. Yeah, because of COVID. Yeah, last year we went over on sped, so we asked for some relief from the town on our sped.
Not just sped, we covered some with sped
Yes,
revolving.
yes, yep.
And then we had a couple other.
Yep. So the
So-
savings that you're referring to is from a couple of years ago.
Okay,
Yep.
my apologies.
No, that's good.
All right, can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the payment of the FY '22 per student invoices.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next one, similar, it's an FY '22 invoice from Otis, which is the company that we contract with to service our elevator at the high school. This was for some work that they did last year. They broke the invoices out into 2 payments. We paid half prior to the work being done, and then we're supposed to be invoiced and supposed to pay the other half once the work was complete. I never saw the invoice. John went through his records and never saw the invoice. I was doing some reconciliation with the account manager at Otis on some current year invoices, and this one came up. Again, one I've never received. I wouldn't have received it directly. I would have just saw it in the warrant. It would have been sent to John. Again, John went through his records. He didn't have a copy, but we do owe them for the other half of the work that was performed on the elevator last year.
And this was from April?
Correct.
So
The
isn't-
invoice
isn't
is
this-
in there.
April, yeah, so isn't that also the last, it's the same as from the June 2021 fiscal year?
No, if it was April.
Okay, no, April 22, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Any other questions? I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve payment of FY '22 Otis elevator invoice.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, next is discussion topics for our next joint meeting. So we had our joint meeting on, I forget the date. Was it just last week?
Usually good
The
dates.
30th?
It was not, it was.
2 weeks ago? When was that?
It was 2 weeks ago, the 30th.
All right, so we had our joint meeting on the 30th, had some good conversation, and one of the actions that we had coming out of that was all of the individual groups, ourselves, Select Board, and FinCom would all get together and bring forward for our next joint meeting to be scheduled discussion topics. And they would be around, like, what are we thinking?
What are we looking for from the
Wait, I
study
said that
that was
sounded so funny.
discussed?
Are we
And right, I think it has been discussed as a regionalization study, as a feasibility study, and it is, I think, parts of both and other parts maybe not of both. So one of the things we said we'd walk out of there when we came back together was we would have some asks as to what we would like to see in this report, what we would like to see studied, what information we would like to get from it.
So, when, I just don't even know where to start without like opening up a rabbit hole. So, when we were talking about this, it wasn't necessarily just about regionalization. It was about how we view schooling for those in the building next door, 7 through 12.
Yes.
Was that your understanding
That's what
as
I
well?
heard. That's
Okay,
what
so
I
it
heard.
wasn't just necessarily regionalization, it was
Correct.
about whether or not it's viable, feasible, financially responsible to have and educate. I'm trying really hard to not put a slant on it.
Yes.
7 through 12. Is that how you all took it as well?
Whatever resides in the building next door.
Right. All encompassing, 7 through 12. So it's mostly how to educate, because it's not just regionalization.
Correct.
Which is the feasibility part that Stephen brought up.
Right.
Whether it's feasible for the town to afford to educate and have its building and all that. What I don't understand about that I meant to further bring up is, again, that building is the town's shelter in place, or shelter. So what is their plan there? But
So that's a topic.
right? There you go. There you go.
I
See?
guess
Look, I got us started.
I had asked during that meeting, and I'm still questioning, who is going to perform such a study that encompasses these topics that were requested? Because after our research, that wouldn't be plausible that they'd probably even find someone to take on such a study. And I know I personally struggle spending money in general on a study for something that we know we didn't have any communities.
So one of the things that I need better understanding of, let me just knock this over, because that seems like a fitting end to my day, is when we were talking about feasibility, in my head, I'm thinking the feasibility studies like we had done through MSBA, which were $800,000 to $900,000, depending upon which year and which version of a study. Is that right?
So that is a
So that is still
feasibility
considered a
study.
feasibility
So
study.
yes. So.
But
there-
that is not what Mr. Libera was referring to. And this is where I'm getting myself confused, is that we were talking about, I believe $20,000 was the placeholder amount of money that was voted on at town meeting for the select board to add to their budget for a feasibility study. But I think to me, it's a bit of a misnomer, because it's not a true feasibility study with $20,000. Because even when we were talking about it at that meeting, we know that $20,000 isn't really going.
We'll cover a fraction
Right.
of it.
What I got from that is the 20,000 was just like the
The-
seed, the starter for that.
Okay.
And he even corrected himself in terms of saying that it was not only and I think that's where this came from, not only about regionalization, but just about what are the other options in terms of educating students 7 through 12 in Granby. Because I think that's where the conversation stemmed from. You know, the schools may have, started that conversation, but certainly couldn't have, captured the full extent of what other towns are thinking, not school committees and superintendents, but towns. And then on top of that, what are other options for educating students 7 through 12? And I guess in my mind, if the conversation isn't regionalization, if the conversation isn't renovation, if the conversation isn't rebuild, I'm struggling with what are the other questions then that we're asking in terms of being creative about educating the students 7 through 12. Like what are those other options and that people are thinking of that haven't been kind of tossed around or considered or out there?
Right, and I will be perfectly blunt. I'm having a hard time having this conversation because we have capital requests that were voted on by the town we were told not to call it a caveat, but with that little
Specific
language. And so if we can't do what the townspeople are saying that they're going to do, because I bet if you interviewed 130 people on the street about what that article meant, the general population is not going to understand that they didn't already vote for it.
I don't disagree. I
Because
think you're
honestly-
right. I think
When I went through and read all of that, I was like, okay, we're good. And people left that meeting and they were happy, thinking the school got some stuff and we're gonna make some forward progress. So to me, I'm hung up on that, so it's very difficult for me to sit here and have a conversation about what the future is when we have this huge amount of money that is supposedly earmarked, and someone asked me a question on the street, so to say, after watching our last meeting, and wanted to know what happened to that money that was voted on.
I can't say specifically, but my understanding is because it was approved at town meeting with that language, that money gets earmarked. What happens to it if the project doesn't move forward, I don't know.
And
If
if
it
it-
gets turned into free cash, that I don't know.
They
And
did say it at the meeting that I think it,
He didn't say, he said it wouldn't come back to us, but he didn't say
Right.
where it goes.
But it also sounded, at least my interpretation, multiple times as that Glenn was going to meet with John and that they were going to talk about and move forward those two
Right.
requests.
His language wasn't specifically strong, because I imagine in the circumstances he couldn't say, because they still had
Correct.
to have the actual meeting.
Right.
It was very strongly alluded to that it was more of just, they needed to get together, say yes, and move on from there.
Yeah, so I'd love a follow-up.
So,
So in theory, we shouldn't have to be concerned
But
about those funds at this point?
I will be honest, I haven't looked to see if anything has been posted.
so nothing's been posted. The concrete next steps, as I understood them,
I'm sorry, we're
I'm-
talking in circles again,
that's
like we were
fine,
at the
that's
meeting.
fine,
but-
and that was not my intention to put this agenda item on, and I think, and I'll come back to it in a second, but,
Apparently I needed to vent, so.
Well, no,
the
it's,
concrete items that I had were that, John Libera and Glenn Sexton were going to meet to essentially decide the fate of the two school capital improvement requests, that were approved in May of 2022 before January 1st of 2023. Glenn would be reaching out to both committees regarding a follow-up meeting. And all three committees should be prepared to bring ideas as to what questions we'd like answered through a study so that consultants can be sought to quote the price of a study prior to town meeting on May 8th, 2023.
okay, so that's my sticking point, is I'm concerned that we can bring up topics, or they can, because to be honest, this is just my opinion, I don't feel that a study is an appropriate use of town funds, but that's just me. Because I feel like we have to educate grades 7 through 12. It's like asinine to me to even act like there's another option in this town. But my concern is, again, is there even a consulting company that's going to take on these topics? Or could we potentially meet again come January, February? And then I could just feel like there could be no progress made if they don't have a company to even take on such a task. So I would have requested that the people wanting to facilitate this took it upon themselves prior to our meeting to reach out to consultants to see if anyone would even take it on, because there's a real chance it's gonna be like a needle in a haystack thing
well,
trying to find.
furthermore though, whose responsibility is it to find the person that would do it? Is that on us? Is that on
And we weren't the ones that brought,
select board? I don't believe that's
Well,
finance.
Can I back it up even one step
Yeah, please.
further? So, my understanding was to come into this next joint meeting, just like Stephen had said, was to come in with, questions or ideas or whatever to kind of put together this idea or whatever, thing, right, to kind of move forward as the feasibility study to kind of present at town meeting. And you're right, so I guess I'm struggling with what this is, the intention of what this is even to look like.
Right.
To even present at town meeting without having the knowledge of who could potentially do it, where these ideas are coming from in terms of educating, students in grades 7 through 12, when we've just, we talked about options A, B, and C, and then it was talked about that's not what we said with options A, B, and C, then there could be multiple options that nobody's considering, but then we're supposed to go back to the meeting with ideas about what we want to see the study focus on, but then there's not these options, so I kept getting these like back and forth thoughts about what the intention and purpose was, and so I feel like if there's not this focus on the purpose and intention of this study driving these questions from the beginning, then we're coming at it kind of backwards. And if we're coming at it backwards and then potentially trying to set this up to propose to people as an option on town meeting floor, then I'm not sure how that is going to be received either. And I think that overall is where I'm kind of struggling with all of the information.
And what do we as a board want to bring back? I mean, we are our own committee. Can we have a conversation here and see what do we feel that this does or doesn't look like? I mean, we could go back and say, potentially, like, we don't know if this is even.
So one of the things that I said at the, go ahead, Audrey.
No.
I was gonna soapbox, it's fine, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I started to think of is, like, is it one study, or does it need to be ultimately, like, potentially multiple? Like, as far as feasibility of that building, we would have gotten that through MSBA in that process, and then that would have told us, is that building remodeled, like, something that can be remodeled, or is it tear down? Like, that would be done through that piece, through MSBA.
But to be perfectly clear, we withdrew our MSBA
I know,
application.
I saw that and I wasn't happy.
But it's not gonna go forward without the support from
Of the
everybody in
town
town
anyway.
anyways.
I agree. I understand that part, but I
So-
feel like, so that study would have handled that essentially, but then you become to that part of the next two questions, but ultimately, option A, B, C, D doesn't matter if the town doesn't think we can fund a school, but I guess how do we get that answer? Because even if we don't have a school, it's not like you're free and clear of of spending. Like, you're still gonna have to pay money to educate the kids that live here in town, no matter what, plus transportation. Like, so where would we, I don't even understand how, yeah.
So, I'm gonna try, as you all have,
Right?
to speak somewhat coherently about this. So I think I agree, and I think I said that night, Audrey's right, that paying for a study that leads us to the potential for pursuing a renovation or a rebuild, the first step of that process is a study. So we could be paying for a study that leads to another study. So, like, I'm almost wondering, is it in fact more of an exploration of regionalization, grades 7 through 12, because if regionalization isn't the option, then the two options are do nothing and deal with the building that we have as best as you can, or a rebuild, reno, remodel, whatever it might be, which if you go through MSBA, which I would think we would want to because you get reimbursed, then you are going to have that study. I also wonder if the question is put on a ballot with some information to say, as a town, do you prefer to maintain local control of your students in 7 through 12, and this could be the potential impact of that, or not, and this could be the potential impact of the not. And we might not have perfect cost analysis on everything, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news. both are gonna come with a pretty significant price tag. And a regionalization is a potentially lifelong price tag, where a building project could be a 20 to 30 year price tag. So they're both pretty long term, but
And the other thing is, just to clarify, the wish of us all and the high level is 100% a brand new building. I'm willing to sit here and say, if we can get an honest to goodness maintenance and updating plan for the high school, for me, that's like, when we're talking about we don't want to educate our kids, I'd rather have a plan in hand from the town, an agreement that we're going to spend some money to update and maintain the building that we have. It may not be ideal, but it's better than seeing the building be empty and do nothing, you know, and rot away. My personal thought,
I just wish that there was a way that even if there was some sort of regionalization study, like that would give specifics, because I think the general consensus of people that keep talking about it think it's going to be such a savings, and it very well may be, but I don't think it's as large life-saving thing as people think it's going to be, and I don't know how we would get that.
so I wonder if that is a potential study that could be done, is to say option A, B, C, if you looked at regionalization, 7 through 12 with community A would be this, like I wonder if that might be some information that at least then you'd have maybe 1, 2, 3 options that you could give some ballpark numbers about. I am not saying that I am for that, I'm just saying that.
We keep saying 7 through 12 because that's what's over there, but like, hello, like that's a whole nother. So what happens if we go through a whole process and something else happens as far as capacity and whatever else? Like, what do you do then?
So I've had some conversations with people from neighboring towns that have regional districts that I work with, that have sat on school committees. And some basic facts is, when you regionalize, there, like you said, Audrey, I want people to understand there is still a price tag associated with that. The thing that we need to understand is all of the Granby residents, if they choose to not go to the regional high school or 7 through 12 school that's provided,
School choice.
the town of Granby, the town they reside in, is still responsible for school choice and the transportation that goes with it. When you have a regional school, you are responsible for transportation and your fair share, whatever the regionalization agreement deems that to be. In our instance, as we've been looking at it right now, we're looking at a single town to single town partnership. Like, we're not, if we were thinking about, Amherst, and they're already a 4 town and we were the 5th town, we would be responsible for our 5th of that budget. But when you're talking about going with South Hadley or Belchertown or Ludlow or Hatfield or Hadley, that's a 50-50 partnership. So you need to, as I understand it, again, I'm speaking in as things were relayed to me. If any of the towns that you reach out to don't have a building that's large enough to accommodate the number of students you're talking about bringing, then there's the discussion of now this regionalization becomes its own like municipality, and they need to then go out and purchase land for the new building to be built upon. And now, for as long as that building is in existence, you're in an agreement with that town to maintain that building, and there's a lot less control over your portion of the school budget. You're essentially, as I understand, again, sort of given an invoice, like, here you go. You still have to vote for it at town meeting, but there's a lot less discussion, and there's a lot less control. You're gonna say, here you go, your per pupil cost is this. Oh, by the way, we're adding 3 and 4 and 5 different new classes, we're adding some new teachers, blah, 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 whatever it is. here you go. Or opposite, we're cutting this, that, this, that, we have no money, or there's not gonna be any specials, there's not gonna be any athletics, whatever. There's really not a whole hell of a lot you get to do to say. I mean, that's like an extreme, but there's, the amount of control that we have when we're educating our own students essentially becomes a lot less. And all of those things still cost things. Now you will be paying for your portion of all the administrative salaries. You'll be paying your portion of the staff salaries. Plus, we have an elementary school and a superintendent and staff here. And all of the money that we pay into retirement for, what is that called? I always get it wrong. Like the retired teachers' health insurance, that's not going away. Granby, not the regionalization, will still have to fund that. Because that's a lifelong thing, right? For
retired teachers.
Does Tracy do any sort of informational on regionalization? I'm just trying to think of it as a resource.
Excuse me.
I'm not sure. I mean, when I think regionalizing, I don't know of any new regionalization partnerships that happened in the last. I don't even know. Most places don't do them anymore.
I know there's
lawsuits to try
she
to
might
break
be able
them.
to connect us with places that
I'm just curious. I don't think
are-
that people understand per se, and even ourselves. I know I don't get the whole.
So maybe
scope.
that could be one of our discussion topics
Of
is
what?
to have like a guest speaker, someone to come either from MASC or MSBA.
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 MSBA is really going to talk about a building project, not specific
Okay.
on regionalizing, but
But MASC or someone from a regional school, like how the budget is worked on. I'll just call it guest speaker.
I just think there's so much to it. I mean,
On how it all
not only
works.
having someone interested, but what our responsibility as a town would be. I think that would be the key point to hit home is what Granby's
Well, and
portion would
Stephen,
still be.
when you were sharing all of that information you shared a file with us, there was some data in there about, I opened it and read it that day, now I'm trying to remember. Was there a contact number too from Desi,
From the Collins.
right?
so yeah, and we talked to the people from
The
Desi
Collins
last
Center, right.
and Collins Center. Adam and I met with Collins Center and Desi last February, and which
Their
is what prompted
directive
us
was
to
to find
send out a
Send out the
survey
letter.
to other
Is
Their
that
main
someone
point
though
of-
to reach out and include perhaps a chair of another committee though to be part of that conversation, to hear it
Yeah, if-
firsthand?
Well, I think
From a
rather than a chair
professional?
though, they almost want,
From the town's perspective.
correct.
So I know school choice just came up too, so the other thing to consider is not only would we like have more Granby students potentially be choicing out, we would not be getting any choice in funding, specifically 7 through 12. If I were to venture a guess, it would have an impact K through 6 as well, but so this year, that would be just 7 through 12, that's like round numbers, $60,000. That doesn't include any special ed reimbursement, which we would be getting. So again, in the grand scheme of it, $60,000 shouldn't be a reason that we do or don't do anything, but it's just another impact to consider.
Right, but if we look at all of our school choice and what that gets us, it's a much different number.
Right, especially when you think siblings, like if there's only one at the high school and 2 at East Meadow, you're gonna likely lose that whole family, potentially.
Yeah,
I guess what-
so if last year choice was 107, so then we're talking about $500,000.
What I just can't get around is that we reached out to all the communities and every single one responded back that they were uninterested except for sharing services potentially, which we already do with another district. So I feel like just how to be proactive about utilizing our time in the best way possible when we're all meeting. If there's something that's truly not really an option, how do we get past that to move on to other options that are viable.
I think that they think, my understanding, I should say, of it is that if somebody that were to run a true study would reach out not just to school committee members, but also town, so that it would be a town-to-town conversation too.
So how, I guess that's a question then. If someone, I wish I could ask a member of the audience, because if someone reached out to a select board,
Mm-hmm.
select board to select board,
Can we phone a friend?
regarding the schools, would they not then involve the school committee? Because the school committee makes the decisions for the school?
I would think typically that in most situations, the school committee would be notified that a question was asked. I would think personally, but I don't know for sure.
Because I'm thinking if we reached out to the superintendent and the school committee, which is what we did,
Mm-hmm.
those would be the two, maybe not the superintendent as much, but certainly the school committee would be the ones that would have, or is that not how it is in every town? Is my understanding at a very high level is that the school committees make the decisions about that.
Yeah, and they would be the most familiar in terms of their budgets, enrollments, capacity.
Geographic locations, I mean, some of them, it was just, it's too far.
So they would make the decision then on behalf of their school, and then it would go in front of the town.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be posed, we would like to enter into this agreement. The town would say yay or nay. That's my understanding how it works, because I know 30 years ago, when I was in high school and we tried to regionalize with South Hadley, the towns voted it down, but all the work had been done. Like, I was part of the regionalization study. I went to South Hadley for a week for classes. My stepsister, who lived in South Hadley, came to Granby for a week for classes. Then we met with the school committee members and told them what we thought and how we liked about what we didn't like. You know, we had to report out to our teachers, like where we were in comparison for curriculum, how different it was, what choices they had, different things like that. And then they made the decision, but it was a dollars and cents thing on the town's side of things that got voted down. But, you know, all of that work had been done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for our purposes, and I don't know who does it, how it gets done, but ultimately, this comes down to the town wondering what's the most cost-effective approach to educating students in 7 through 12. In order to answer that question, like, I think we need some information on what it might cost to regionalize, renovate, rebuild. I think those were the three that Jill mentioned. I don't know how we get information or a vote from the town without that. So I think ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, that's our question is, what's the financial impact of regionalization? What's the financial impact of renovation? What's the financial impact of a rebuild? And what's the financial impact of doing nothing? And I think each one of them have impact beyond the finances, but I think that's ultimately what Finance Committee and certainly members of the town information they may need to make that decision ultimately.
Okay, so
And I don't know any other options. Like, I know that there was like,
Yeah,
it
like I
felt
don't,
like there was implied that there were other creative solutions.
well, I
Well, they
think
kept
like
talking about the
modular
trailers.
classrooms
Trailers
came
and
up,
tents.
which that's not a long-term solution.
No,
That's
and they
like
have more
burning
problems
money.
than anything else in terms of heating and cooling
Right,
and
yeah,
like
I think-
I mean, the list goes on, and you're probably spending more money trying to I can't even.
Yeah, I think the
So-
options that we, and by we I mean the town, looks at need to be viable options. And I think if we're really looking at it, trailers around this campus isn't truly a viable option.
No, that's like a worst case, we had a hurricane roll through scenario.
And we
not-
had to do it
not we
for
sat and
3
twiddled our thumbs
months
waiting to figure
or,
out what we're gonna do.
yeah, agreed. So I think Jill laid it out, like regionalization, renovation, rebuild, and the financial impact of that. And I think Jen had said something, and maybe it was Stephanie, about, if not, like, what's a clear maintenance plan and updates to the building, and like, what would be the impact of that? And I think ultimately that's it. I don't know that we should go digging for other options that, right? Because I hope it's not the do nothing option, because I think there is going to be a financial impact of that. There is a financial impact to that every day. You know, dollars and cents are going to things that aren't going specifically to classrooms and to students, which is certainly a concern of mine. And I recognize that not everybody in town is going to share the same concerns, and nor should they, to be honest. But that's part of our job, is to say, how do we get more of the money that we are receiving from the state and town to our students, to support student learning, to support teacher growth and development, to do those things. And right now we're spending excessive money on maintaining our boilers, and it's not just dollars and cents. Some of it is time, right? So when the night we had that meeting, the power went out, right? There was
crazy
talk
wind.
that we
were
would,
talking about it blowing out there because the
Yeah.
lights were flickering.
there was talk that we would lose, we might not even have school. There was electricity that was coming into this building but wasn't coming to the pump house. There was a leg that was out, and John Sullivan was here 7:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. making sure that systems were running, and right? So there's not like a dollars and cents cost to that, but as I'm sure you could imagine, John Sullivan wasn't productive the next day because we sent him home because he had been here for 12 hours overnight and things like that. So, like, dollars and cents, a study's going to give us some black and white numbers, and I think ultimately for people to make a decision, they need to see that so that they can make an informed decision. But like, if we land on the do nothing option, I think it continues to hurt students, staff, and it just becomes more challenging at a time that we're trying to provide more opportunities to students. And we'll continue to be creative and like work with what we have. And I think people recognize that, like, we're trying to state facts. We're not complaining about it. We're not commiserating about it. It's the reality that we're living, and we're making the best of it. It's unfortunate in some ways, but I don't think it's any individual or any committee's fault. I think we just need to get information out to this community so people can make a decision, so we can move forward. Because I can submit a statement of interest every spring to the school building authority, but until like people are faced with having to make that decision, I think we're going to continue to be here talking in circles.
On that note, I feel like we have our topics. We have, you know, you have the one about the high school. If there's no high school, where would the shelter be? You have that on your notes?
Yep.
If you're all okay with it, I think we move to the next.
I'll draft something and share it with you all before the break.
Excellent. Next up is our enrollment dashboard.
Like months like this one's pretty cut and dry. 3 in, no out. They're all pre-K.
Awesome. Any other questions or anything about enrollment dashboard?
Nope, not for me.
That's the shortest, officially the shortest conversation we've ever had about the enrollment dashboard.
It's a great month.
I like it. Superintendent's report.
Perfect. So Just want to reiterate a message that went out from Ms. Desjardins today for East Meadow. It's clear students are enjoying the snow that's on the ground. Want to remind families that they should have boots and snow pants if they're playing in the snow. We are trying to collect gently used snow pants and boots for those who might need them. And if you would like to donate some, please drop them off in the main office. If your student is in need of snow pants or boots, you can reach out to Ms. Desjardins at her email or stop in the main office and we'll work on getting them for you. PTO is hosting another event this Friday. It's Hot Cocoa with Santa. It's, again, Friday, December 16th at East Meadow from 6 to 8:30. And then just a reminder to families that next Friday, December 23rd, is an early dismissal for students. So that's 11 o'clock at the junior senior high school, 11:40 at East Meadow. And then the schools will be closed until that Tuesday, December 27th, and then again closed on that Monday, January 2nd. School reopens for students on Tuesday, January 3rd. If you do need to visit East Meadow, the junior senior high school, or central office during the holiday break, I would strongly encourage you to arrange a time with that appropriate person in advance because it is a time where a number of staff will be taking time away from work that week. So if you have something pressing that you'd like to get done during the break, please reach out to that appropriate person so you can schedule something with them. And I hope everyone has a happy, healthy holiday and Happy New Year. And we'll be right back here on January 3rd.
Happy New Year. All right. Any questions or anything? All right, Adam, you're up.
I got a couple quick ones. One, Chartwell sent a survey home. It was a hard copy. We're trying to provide that hard copy electronically. But they did send a survey home to families at East Meadow, just trying to gain some interest on what families like, don't like about the meals, what they can improve upon. So that went home last week. If families could complete those and send them back, I believe the due date is the 23rd of December. That'd be great. It would help Chartwell's with some planning and changing up the options at East Meadow. Second, the charging stations in the East Meadow parking lot have become a pretty hot topic, apparently. They currently don't work. We've been dealing with this for several months now. We are currently working with a company out of Boston to diagnose the problem. There's a couple options. One is quick and relatively inexpensive. I know David was coordinating with that company to get him out here to try that one. If that doesn't work, then we're looking at a pretty extensive and expensive option to repair them. And I think at that point we need to make a decision on how much we want to spend to get those operational. So
Are we required to have them? Like, that's why we have them? Is
I believe we're required to have them because we are a green community.
There was something with.
Are they required to work? I'm not sure.
There was a
Probably.
grant or something that we
Well,
got.
I guess
think.
I'm wondering, like, I know there was a green community but upgrades done through one of the previous select board members. They were getting the lighting done and
Yeah,
things
these
that-
were with the building project.
Okay.
But I think in conjunction with being a green community, they were put in during the building project. Again, we've spent a lot of time and some money to date trying to figure out what's wrong with them. Again, we're gonna try this first option and hopefully it's a quick fix. But again, if that doesn't work, the other option is pretty expensive. So we have to.
Favorite question of mine, again, there's no warranty that went with these systems being newly put in 5 years.
Yeah,
I-
I mean, I'm sure there is, but we're 4 years into the building now.
Right.
So
But
like barely worked.
yeah, again, I don't know.
it would just be
We're-
something I'd be curious about. I mean,
Yeah, I can double check. I think they're out of warranty. Yeah,
What we think is happening now is, the network cable that goes to the unit is the point of failure. There were some problems with the units. Adam and John Sullivan worked with that vendor to get some parts rebuilt, and they've been reinstalled. And now there's a problem with it connecting to the school's network. The challenge is that it's a very unique cable that connects those devices to the network. It's not fiber, it's not copper. That's typically what is used in schools. It's a unique cable that's designed to run underground where there's exposure to water and the elements. Ironically, you would think that's a very durable cable. They think that cable has failed. Depending on where the point of failure is will determine how much it costs to fix it. If like Adam said, they're optimistic the problem is on one end or the other end, and then they can easily fix it. If the problem's in the middle, underground, and the whole cable has to be pulled out, and another one has to be pushed through that conduit that has a lot of other stuff in it, that's where it becomes very expensive. So that's where we are right now. So I hope I
No, absolutely.
Thank you,
So
David.
I guess the other reason I want to say it, because right now it does not seem like, we talk about the equipment being under warranty, it does not appear at the moment the equipment is the problem.
So that was my question. It's
Yeah,
not the
sure.
charging unit, it's the, potentially, it could be the cable
It
going to
does
it.
not appear that right now, right? We obviously won't know for sure until the cable's fixed.
Right.
But what we're hoping optimistically is two things, that it's the lesser expensive option where the damage is on the end that can be easily accessed and fixed, and then once communication is reestablished, all those devices work. That's what we're hoping.
But even if it's that cable, that's not something that's under any type of warranty from,
I don't know. We could.
Do we still have contact with that vendor?
Yeah, I don't know who.
That was something that was coordinated as part of the building project,
Yeah.
and we never did business with those people beyond that. That was part of the construction. We never had any reason to. And the company that we have out of Boston was recommended by the company who currently provides our level 2 support for the school network, and they also provide the level 2 support for the town's computer systems.
Thank you.
That's all I have, unless there's any other questions on.
Jill, you guys don't meet again until January, right?
Right.
See, look at me, I remember.
You did. I was like, why is she calling me? And I was like, oh, right.
All right, any last minute anything before we go into executive session?
Do we need to make a plan for our next meeting? Are we doing subcommittees?
Okay.
Might not be a bad idea to do subcommittees, because it's really one work week between now and that meeting.
Right, so next meeting is in January on the 3rd.
Maybe
So
the
let's.
3rd and 17th.
The 3rd and 17th, so do we, yeah, might as well do committees on the 3rd then. Which committees would like to meet? We probably should meet for budget, yes?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, one other one.
Regulations for anything?
Probably the
New.
newly formed.
person.
Oh yeah, maybe the new person one.
What did we call that?
It was like onboarding, or right, or like orientation.
And then
or
is
something.
there still the community engagement, like considering we've got some stuff coming up, that would probably be good to do too, and make a plan of how we're going to engage the community, whether that's even creating a flyer with some potential questioning of what we can do.
Okay, that's 3, that's pretty good. Anything else for the agenda next time at this point? I don't think we carried anything over. Okay,
We said January 3rd,
yeah.
so we probably won't have heard back from anybody, yeah. No, I'm good.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. We'll now vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Aye. That's it for us. Thanks, everybody.